Our first speaker this morning is one whom I'm proud to introduce, Joe Skousen. Joe is the publisher of the World Affairs Brief, he's a political scientist specializing in constitutional theory. Joe was raised in Oregon and later served as a fighter pilot for the U.S. Marine Corps during the Vietnam era. Doesn't look old enough for that, but I think that's true. During the 80s, he took a leave of absence to serve as the chairman of the Conservative National Committee in Washington, D.C. with Howard Phillips. He's the author of 4 books, 1 on law and government, and 3 on special design innovations in home security architecture. His latest book in this field is Strategic Relocation, North American Guide to Safe Places, and is active in consulting with persons who need to relocate for security and increased self-sufficiency. I need to make sure I get a copy of that book. Others books include Essential Principles for the Conservation of Liberty. Joe is currently at work on his latest book titled Foundations of the Ideal State, a comprehensive treatise on government structure and practice, constitutional theory, and legal changes necessary to preserve liberty. Let's welcome Joe Skousen.
Better probably hold this. It's really a pleasure to be with you today. I've enjoyed yesterday in the association with those of you I've been able to talk to. You know, in my formal training as a political scientist, I was confronted with lectures on all sides, and this, mind you, was at a conservative university here in the West. Confronted with those professors who were praising the glories of government action to solve all of the world's problems. And of course, naturally, that didn't set well with me, a nephew of the renowned constitutional scholar W. Cleon Skousen, most recently vilified by Salon.com in an attack piece. Since he's the mentor of Glenn Beck, they had to attack the mentor in order to get at Glenn Beck. I spent all of my university years fighting the instructor's liberal socialist beliefs. Once again, at a conservative university. How does this happen? Because of credentials. In order to be accredited, a university has to make sure that everybody has a doctorate or a master's degree at least. In order to get a doctorate, at this particular conservative university in political science, you have to have published in the American Political Science Association Journal, which is a Marxist publication. And so this door puts everybody through a door, or at least that wants to get into the system, that has to please the establishment, which has Marxist ideals. And of course, it doesn't help when conservatives often feel compelled to seek the accolades of the world, the approval of the world, and the acceptance of the world in order to get further ahead in their profession. And that's why it's extremely important early on in this life for those that have conspired against liberty to control public education from the teachers' colleges, from the textbook writing standpoint, and from the credentialed accreditation associations. They're all filled with status. Now, but perhaps, and so I've spent a good deal of my life, especially when I was back with Howard Phillips in Washington, fighting the compromises of the Reagan administration, where we formed the Conservative National Committee, especially to try to get conservatives to recognize that even with the best of the conservative administrations we've had to date, Ronald Reagan, he was under tremendous pressure through his Vice President George H.W. Bush to make all kinds of compromises, which he did. He resisted for a while until they threw an assassination attempt at him. It had a profound effect on he and especially his wife Nancy towards getting him to stop fighting the powers that be. These people that we're dealing with are ruthless, and they have much more power than we would assume. But perhaps the most difficult fight I've faced in all of my career in this battle, in this movement, have been the phony conservative Republican administrations who were in reality globalists masquerading as Christians, masquerading as conservatives, and very, very effective at getting religious leaders, especially those with large tele-evangelical ministries, to buy into the concept. To get a place at the table at the White House, you have to at least pay obedience to the Republican Party and the fact that we are the road to salvation. And despite the insider information which I got and which others got and published this in the World Affairs Brief, that after the prayer breakfast, traditionally the White House staff would sit around and laugh and snicker and guffaw about how they had fooled the ministers, how they had borne witness of Jesus Christ, even with tears in their eyes, and seen how they had all bought it. Now that does not speak well of the spiritual inspiration of those leaders who attended. And as you know, Chuck Baldwin has refused to do that. He started out with Jerry Falwell. Jerry Falwell went the path of praising the Bush and the Republicans, and Chuck broke with him on that. He refused to do that. He sensed that something was wrong, and he was right, but he's a minority. So the task is made even difficult by the millions of America willing to believe in these frauds and somehow could not detect, as well as the ministers themselves, they resisted the signals of conscience that would have made it easier to detect these wolves in sheep's clothing. Now all of this brings me to my purpose today, and that's to give you a frank and realistic analysis of the real obstacles we face in breaking the two-party grip on the American society. And I will divide them into 6 groups. Number 1, I'm just going to list them briefly first, and then I'll take them in detail. Number 1, institutionalized public ignorance. This is owing directly to the public school system. It's one of our worst enemies. It's creating more people in resistance to truth than we're gaining in our one-to-one conversion all the time. We're gaining in the sense of gaining numbers, but in proportion, they're converting millions to our hundreds. Millions to our hundreds. Because of the public school system. And yet, it's interesting enough and sad to say that the majority of conservative Republicans in this nation, and that's the body of conservatives of which we generally try to get most of our converts from, but the majority of them are wedded to the public school system because they too, even the conservatives, have become benefit corrupted. Because they make people like me, who homeschooled at my own expense all of my 6 children, pay for their public schools. And that's why they get all of those computers and fancy gymnasiums and fancy buildings, because those of us who do not participate are forced to pay. And when you go to them and say, as a matter of principle, we ought to make sure that those that don't participate don't have to pay, and they will immediately turn against you. This is a sad fact that conservatives have been corrupted themselves. And there are other aspects, too, related to health care and things which we will start to see this corruption spread to other things.